On March 2nd, the wrestling world lost Doug Furnas, one of the strongest men not only in the industry, but in the world. After getting his start in Knoxville, Tennessee, Furnas would be linked to Phil LaFawn for his entire career, working for All Japan Pro Wrestling as one of the top tag teams in the world. Dave Meltzer's Wrestling Observer newsletter awarded Furnas and LaFawn the 1992 Match of the Year for a tag bout with Kenta Kobashi and Tsuyoshi Kikuchi.
Doug was a great tag team partner for Phil in the sense that Phil was a basic great worker, and Doug could do anything in the ring that he set his mind to do. Him and like Jim Brunzell and Rocky Johnson and Pillman were now off the top of my head were like the best dropkick guys that I think I ever saw. The thing that he should be remembered for is that he's one of the strongest men who ever lived, and pound for pound. I mean, he had you're talking about in a sport setting a record in 1987 in strength sport. That here we are in 2012. It's not that far off the record today. You're talking about one of the strongest men who ever lived, at least when it comes to powerlifting.
It was in bodybuilding that Furnas gained his largest notoriety when transitioning to pro wrestling, leaving an impression on many aspiring bodybuilders, including a young Paul Lazenby, who would later fight for the Pancrase organization in Japan.
Being a powerlifter and a wrestler, Doug was one of my primary idols. Aside from the late Dave Passanella, who had a similar look to Doug and unfortunately died much earlier, Doug was the man at 275 in the 275 class for a long time. And this guy had a 986 squat, 601 bench, and I believe 826 deadlift. Definitely a guy that from the very earliest days of my career when I broke in 1991, that guy was on my radar, and he was one of the guys that I looked up to the most in the business.
North American fans got to see Furnas briefly in WCW in the early 90s and would later sign with the World Wrestling Federation in 1996. Among those he shared the locker room with was Stone Cold Steve Austin.
I remember having a few matches with Doug, and I always really liked the guy's work, and it's sad that he's gone. I'm a big fan of powerlifting and bodybuilding, and Doug was one of those guys that was just a squatting machine. And just watching some of the numbers he put up with ease and his squat style. Hell of a drop kick, one of the best drop kicks that's ever been in the business, especially for a guy of his size, the explosion, the height that he could get. And I know him and Phil had great success over in Japan, but just one of those guys that was a pleasure to be around, was a hard worker and a straight shooter and a trustworthy guy. Yeah, I just remember nothing but good things. And when I looked at his accomplishments in the world of powerlifting, that's probably, what impressed me most was just how strong he was, particularly in the squat.
In his later years, Furnas worked with troubled youth and battled Parkinson's disease, with his heart giving out at the age of 52. Fight Network sends its condolences to the friends and family of Doug Furnas.